Hi, everyone. I'm Matt, founder and CEO of LiveSchool. This is the LiveSchool podcast, and our guests today are Rhonda Herrick, principal, Ben Behling, seventh grade teacher, and Angie Raymond, behavior support specialist at Bloomer Middle School in Wisconsin. Thank you all for joining.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
So maybe let's start off with your old paper-based system. I'm really curious to hear how things used to work, going a few years back in the time machine. What was your punch card system, and what was kind of the motivation, and how did that all work for you?
Punch cards were in place at Bloomer Middle School before I became principal here. So it was sort of an inherited system. Each week, students received a punch card, and there were 5 circles on the card. And there were the back of the card explained how they could lose punches. And so, minor behavior infractions, teachers literally had hole punchers that they would take a punch off of the student's card. And then there were incentives built in. If you kept your punches for the week, at the end of each week, there was some sort of grade level celebration or opportunity. And then there were also losses of certain privileges if you lost all of your punches in a week. What I can say administratively about punch cards is that first off, you can imagine that it was a lot of time because they had to be created every week. So a lot of copying and cutting and making sure that every teacher had these punch cards for all of our 400 students on a weekly basis. And then more importantly, just the negative focus. We're going to take this punch from you, and there's no place on this card where we're going to recognize what you've done right. Simply the language of it. Like we talked a lot about, well, I gave him a punch. We took a punch. Why did you get a punch?
Yeah.
For educators to use that language.
Yeah, someone might misunderstand you if they overhear that, right?
Yeah, from the get-go, it made me cringe.
Yeah. That's really interesting. So as you've moved to more of a digital school-wide system, have you also made a transition to like more of a positive points-based approach, or what has that been like?
Absolutely. The implementation of LiveSchool completely, we have done away with the punch card.
No more punches.
No more punches. No more punches. Yeah, and I think what we find is that there is such a focus on the positive, and that students and teachers and parents are so much better informed about what's going well. It shifts the whole atmosphere, certainly the culture among our students, but I would say, and the two of you can weigh in, that even among our staff, because it takes us from talking continually about what went wrong to having conversations around points that students are earning.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's great. And let's talk more about the positivity. So as you faced this in, it sounded like you had some rewards with the punch card system, but it sounds like you've gone even more all in with the positivity and the fun for students. So like, what's it like as a student at Bloomer Middle? What kinds of things can I earn, if I'm doing really well and meeting all the expectations?
Yeah, I think we've developed each grade level, so we're a 5 through 8. So each grade level has developed their own store and their own processes and systems around when students can earn points. And we've made sure that each grade level has unique things for students that they can get excited about as they, age up and level up in our system. So we've taken ideas from the LiveSchool website. For instance, in 7th grade, one of our popular ones was Teacher Uber, where they can get wheeled around the hallway to their class every day. We've done Teacher Buys You Lunch. We've just done little, some monetary, but some non-monetary things that kids get super excited about, like hat pass, getting to wear a hat for a day, or just things like that. So it's really been fun to have those monetary things, but also have them exchange their points for just random things that each grade can be creative with.
Yeah, that's really cool. Have you noticed any trends in like, do students gravitate towards more of the experiences or more of the, prizes and physical things, or does it just depend?
I think that's the cool thing about LiveSchool is that it can fluctuate so much. Last year, the students in 7th grade loved the non-physical things. This year, they loved snacks. So, and the nice thing is that it can be changed whenever. So, yeah.
Yeah, you can kind of go with students changing tastes, I guess. Have there been any rewards that have been sort of a surprise hit where you've said like, huh, I wouldn't have thought they would enjoy that one so much?
One that comes to my mind is with our eighth graders, who in any system can be a bit of a hard sell. They're just getting to be of an age where you have to be a little more creative. And we are small enough, our classes are just under 100. And so one of our eighth grade teachers once a month makes a certain kind of brownie that the students like save their points so that they get one of these brownies. Literally, in this little school, we can get away with this. Literally a homemade pan of brownies brought in by this teacher. I think some of it is the novelty of who the teacher is and the fact that he baked them. But that really surprises me. The enthusiasm around these homemade brownies is big among eighth grade students who don't get enthused about a lot. So yeah.
I mean, we hear that a lot from middle schools. Like eighth grade is always the grade where it's trying to find that thing that they'll think is cool enough. And it sounds like you found a magic recipe, pun intended there. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Very cool. And just going back a little bit, my understanding is you piloted LiveSchool specifically with the seventh grade for a little bit. So I'm not sure, Mr. Behling, if you were kind of the mastermind behind the grade level pilot there. What were some of the learnings? I think it's so smart, starting small. That's something that I think when school-wide systems sometimes stumble, it's almost always because you went too big and didn't make sure everyone knew what was going on. So what was that experience like? What were some of the learnings, and how have you taken that into, growing this into something everybody is doing?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I'd heard and used the program briefly in student teaching, and just was something as we were looking at those punch cards, like we talked about, what are other ideas we could try in seventh grade? And we're like, oh, I've used this before. Let me reach out to the company. And you guys are nice enough to kind of give us a free trial through our last trimester last year. So we, went through our whole handbook and kind of broke down what points should be our minuses versus our positives and everything, kind of broke down that behavior rubric. And once we did that, we started using it with students, and eventually I got some parents on board at the end of last year. So we felt like we had at least a start where we could teach staff this year. And then, teaching staff this year, I think it's been really interesting for me to see how each grade level use it way differently than I ever imagined they would. And so kind of taking all of that together as a school, we were able to kind of make some changes to what we did last year to make it pretty appropriate for all of our grades. So I think, yeah, it definitely is. The bigger you go, like you said, the more it can change, but also the more you can learn and kind of mold the program to fit our school.
So did you and your colleagues in seventh grade help kind of show the ropes to the other grade levels? Or how did that training process and getting everyone on board work?
Yeah, we actually formed a committee of the three of us and then teachers from each of our other grade levels. So 6 of us that met about monthly at the start of the year. And there was definitely some training at the very beginning of the school year, and seventh grade team led that. And for me, that was crucial. It was. I mean, admittedly, I don't use it on a daily basis the way that teaching staff do. And there was the buy-in from staff so quickly was because other staff were giving it to them. It wasn't some new idea that, the principal sitting in her office had. It was people who'd already used it and who could address quickly the little issues that come up along the way. And I think having that committee of us who met kind of on an as needed basis, but always, we kept meeting regularly that first half of the school year. And Ben really, without officially being made the leader, he was, because he could put out the fires that were coming up. I think there was a point at which I felt like, should we have done more training before we jumped in? And since then, it's become really clear to me that the pilot was a great way to go. And at some point, we did have to sort of start. And having a committee that got together on a monthly basis, we made a fair number of changes early on and shifts and answered questions and came up with, and now that's really leveled out. We've had less of that come up. And so I feel like our rollout went really quite well. I questioned a little bit along the way, but now in hindsight, I see that, in schools, anytime you're implementing anything, you're building the plane while you're flying it. We don't get to sort of shut down and start over. So yeah, I think it's been a real great way to roll it out.
Yeah, it's such a great balance there because on the one hand, you got some teachers who tried it out, could really speak to it, help point out what worked and little workarounds and things like that. But I think it's also true you do eventually just have to kind of go for it and take that leap of faith. So you kind of had that balance, which is great. It makes so much sense. Miss Raymond, I'm really curious as a behavior support specialist specifically, like what's it like to have the whole school using a data system that you know, is fairly consistent. What has that been like for you?
Well, that's kind of the key, I think, is that it is consistent and it's kind of given us this universal baseline to work with. And like Ben was saying, no matter what grade level, even though we share the same, buttons of points and stuff, but how that looks in each grade can be different. So somebody who takes, a point for disrespect that looks different in fifth grade versus eighth grade, but we can still use that same system. So it's really great. And it wasn't mentioned, but our eighth graders did not participate in the punch card system. It was one of those things where we were trying to prepare them going on to high school and that they weren't necessarily needing that. But so then there was a lot of inconsistencies of, do I mark this or do I not mark this? Do I write them up for this? Do I not? And this has just really kind of leveled out the playing field for all grades. And there are some staff, it kind of seems to work well with personality wise. Like some are a little harsher with things here versus there. But it still kind of evens it all out. So it's not like I'm getting one referral from this one kid from this one teacher all the time. It's pretty consistent across the board.
And speaking of that, has the data been something that your committee, it sounds like you three kind of are the core of the committee and then you have representation from the grades. Have you found any ways to use the data that's been new or helpful?
Yeah, we use it in some of our like determining tiers, like what tiers support our kids need to go into if need be, or just in general, if it's not even a tier thing, sometimes they may need more time in my space for some reason or other because they're coming up quite often. So yeah, we use it in a lot of places, I think.
That's great. So when you're like planning, for instance, for the coming months or even, I mean, next fall, it's probably a little too early, right? But how do you come up with, say, like rewards ideas and things like that? Are you just brainstorming as a committee or like what's sort of the approach or the process you go through?
I would say that our grade level teams, there are 4 to 6 teachers at each of our 4 grade levels. They're really doing that work, understanding the developmental age of students and where their interests lie, and then just getting to know their kids and what that particular group of students is interested in. Also, grade levels that have involved kids, right? Like ask them. One of the things that our 8th graders save their points for are bubblers, like literal cans of that popular drink, and that it's a hot item right now, and they work hard for that.
I'm so out of the loop with what 8th graders are into.
Yeah, it's a thing, believe me.
Yeah.
So I think definitely those rewards are talked about and thought through by the grade level, and they're paying careful attention to who their students are and what do they want, and yeah.
Yeah. That's really interesting, like not going for just one size fits all at the school level, really keeping it close to the kids and empowering the teachers to figure out what works for their grade level.
Also at each grade level, and Ben mentioned this prior, but ensuring that there are a couple of rewards that grade level kind of owns those. So what we don't want is that the big ticket items that we might need to still keep our 7th and 8th graders engaged, that they've been able to do that 5th grade, 6th grade. We say that's just an 8th grade thing, or that's just a 7th grade thing. And that was talk among that committee so that we can be sure that, again, as they're aging up, they're not disengaging from it.
They're sort of unlocking the cool new, they get the brownies for the first time and things that, Love it. That's so cool. So looking ahead to the future, like, are there certain things you're trying to accomplish moving forward with your system? Is it just maintain consistency? Maybe getting students more involved with suggesting ideas, or like what are some of the things that you're hoping to keep developing?
One of the things that we wanted to see happen this year was to have more parents connected to the app. And so at one of our parent-teacher conferences, we had a stack of flyers that sort of, retold, this is what LiveSchool is, this is what it does, and here's how you set it up. I think we're at nearly 70% of our parents now. Yeah, I hope that's true. But I think in the latest data that I had gotten, we're about there as far as those who have set that up. What I am noticing is that in the last 2 or 3 parent meetings that I participated in, where maybe there's been some challenging behaviors from a student, uh, we have found that often parents have incentives at home that for certain students are more valuable than anything we could provide here. And because they can just flip, go to this app on their phone and see those LiveSchool points, it's this really great way for us to communicate daily, even hourly, with parents, where in the past that could be cumbersome. It just getting them what they would need at the end of every day so that they could connect the child's choices at school to maybe what they were going to do in the evening. Now that, and that's coming up a lot in when we are putting interventions in place, also in some of our special education meetings. So I think that we would like to see that be used even more as a way to communicate with our families. But I'm also finding that there's places where we're bringing it up more often. Like, you know what? We need to reinvent this wheel and create a new behavior plan. We have this, and you can look at it in live time. Yeah.
It's a really cool idea. I was thinking about the PBIS, pyramid as you were talking, and for students who do need those tier 2 supports, the idea of like at home tier 2 supports in a lot of cases might be some of the most powerful things you could come up with, right? Like what I'm able to do for fun on the weekend or all that kind of stuff has a huge impact on students. So it's a really smart idea.
Yeah, I mean, we do link this to what is our major behavior referral system. So there are obviously certain behaviors that are above LiveSchool. I mean, we hope they don't happen often, but, and of course they don't happen often here. When we have a behavior that we consider a major behavioral incident, a teacher is writing that up in a different system. But we have linked students who earn or lose 10 LiveSchool points in a week's time do earn a major for that. And so we're sending information to parents to say, and really the way that we're articulating that is we're concerned that in 1 week's time, your child lost this many points. And when we send that incident report, we list from LiveSchool, like, what was it? Like, what is there a theme? Is it always not being prepared for class, or is it always tardy, or have they been consistently not respectful? So we have linked those two systems in that regard. And I think for teachers in the classroom, that's an important piece of what we're doing.
Yeah, I was just thinking that, like, integrating them and teachers not needing to have multiple different systems to think about, that seems, just simplicity goes so far, when you're really busy. So to move towards wrapping up, a couple bigger picture questions I'd love to ask you. So one is just, there's often when schools roll out a system, a positive-based system, sometimes there is that feeling from some staff that, hey, we think students should just do the right thing because it's the right thing. I don't necessarily believe in the incentives or recognizing students for those expectations. I'm curious, did you encounter any of that feeling? And how did you sort of build some consensus about why this was important to your students and developmentally appropriate for your students in middle school?
Yeah, I think I'm sure that we did encounter, and I'm going to let these two speak to that in just a minute. But I would also say that prior to the implementation of LiveSchool, we were in the process, really a 3 to 5 year process of implementing restorative practices and using some responsive classroom techniques as well. So we had encountered what you're describing already with that effort. LiveSchool came in and obviously works so well alongside of restorative practices. So I do feel like we had maybe overcome a little bit of that with the other implementation. Yeah, but
Yeah, I think it just has been easier for staff because it's not one of the things with the punch card system that I think what led to some of this is every day the kids are like, oh, I don't have it. I lost it. I don't know where it is. So if I don't give it to you, you can't take this punch card. And now with this system, it's like, I could just click a button, dude, we're done, we move on, because it turned into a 10-minute conversation on a class that, was wasted because they didn't have their punch card and things like that. So it's really cut down on some of those power struggles with staff and students. And it's just like, clicking a button, we're moving on. If you want to talk about it, fine. If not, you can look at the comment and, away we go, kind of thing. So I think it's worked out really well that way. When I have encountered staff that kind of say, like, they should know this and they should do these things, I kind of go back to the whole, like, there's incentives all across the world all the time for all of us. And I ask them, would you be here if you didn't get a paycheck? And nobody says yes to that. Weird. So, we all need incentives, and we have it. And, you go to get your gas and you get 3 cents back. And I mean, we all have incentives everywhere. So it's no different. And we always try to, or at least I try to enforce that the grade levels that we have, we're just planting seeds. We're never going to see leaps and bounds of, changes necessarily. That would certainly be great, but it's probably not happening in our building. But we still have to set them up for success. And that's how we can do it, is by using some of these things.
I couldn't agree more. And I think it's a really good point. I mean, the world is filled with incentives, and, you can definitely love something for the sake of it, but also it feels good to be recognized and have some fun and get some rewards. And it sounds like your team's doing a great job of blending both of those things. Last question is just, so I always like to ask this question. If you had a billboard that you could, everyone would see on their way to school in the morning, other educators like yourselves, is there like a message or something that's been really important to your team that you would want to, put out there for others?
Yeah, I'm just going to speak to, I'm looking right now at the back of my office door, because for 7 years I've had a sign on the back of my door that says reach all. Yeah. Reach all to teach all. It's a mantra that this staff established about 7 years ago. And the belief is that with middle school kids in particular, you have to reach them, develop a relationship with them, connect with them before you can teach them anything. And LiveSchool has enabled us to do that at an even higher level. We can reach our kids and praise them and show them the good that they're doing. Same with our parents. And when we do that, we recognize that then we can begin to teach them at high levels.
That is really wonderful. And just want to thank you all again for carving out some time, especially on your Friday afternoon, for joining the podcast, and really want to celebrate what you've done. I mean, from going from a paper-based system that was pretty cumbersome, but also a little more focused on the negatives, to something that's really positive-based. You piloted it with a great team and got it going with the whole school. I mean, it's a really great arc for just a couple of years' time. So I appreciate you sharing the story, and thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you.